Welcome. I'm Samantha Jones. Ahead of the August 2nd primary election, News 4 is speaking with the top candidates in some of the key races. Tonight, U.S. Senate candidate Vicky Hartzler is here with us this evening. Really glad you could be with us to kind of walk us through who you are and what you stand for. I want to start with just telling us a little bit about you.
Well, thank you, Samantha. I'm so glad to be here. I'm a wife, mother, a lifelong farmer. I'm a small business owner and a former school teacher, and I'm also a fighter for our values in Washington, and I'm really glad to be here.
Okay, tell me a little bit about why you want to be U.S. Senator and what your priorities will be.
Sure. Well, I want to be senator because we are in crisis as a nation, and I'm very, very concerned. We have an energy crisis, an economic crisis, a border crisis, education crisis, moral crisis, national security crisis. I mean, it is bad. And people that I care about here in this state are being hurt because of the liberal policies coming out of Washington. And I'm the best one to, on day one, be able to take the helm and to turn this thing around because I have the track record of fighting for our values in Washington. And I've been there already helping rebuild the military and being tough against China as a member of the senior member of the Armed Services Committee. I have been standing up for our number one industry, which is agriculture, for many years now. And I am one of the few farmers in Congress. I've been advocating for a strong education for our kids as a former school teacher and as a mom, and I've actually, have the war wounds to show for it, and that I've been suspended from Twitter because as a former coach, I've spoken up for girls' sports, and they have said that violates their hateful conduct just because I say women's sports should be for women, not men pretending to be women. But I'm also on the forefront of standing up for life and family and those basic values. They're so important to Missourians. And so I care about people. That's why I'm running, because I want to help fix things and turn things around so Missourians can prosper once again and be safe and secure.
I want to dive into kind of each of those crises that we talked about, starting with the money. High inflation rates right now are one of the biggest issues plaguing all Americans. It affects everyone. What do you think specifically President Biden should be doing right now that he's not doing in order to curb that inflation and to help Americans?
Yeah, absolutely. They say the average family is having to spend almost $6,000 more this year for the same basket of goods as last year. And kids going back to school, they say it's going to cost about $600 per child. I mean, it is unbelievable. We have to stop this. What we need to do, what the president needs to do, is quit spending money we don't have out of Washington. This overspending has fueled this inflation, plus keeping people at home. We need to get people back to work. Plus, we need to be making things here in America. I had a bill before COVID to bring back our pharmaceutical production back here to America because as a senior member of the Armed Services Committee, I had learned that all the medicines given to our troops were coming from China, or the active pharmaceutical ingredients were coming from China. And now we need to see that we not only need to bring our medical pharmaceutical production back, but also the computer chips and rare earth minerals and everything else along those lines. But also what the president needs to do is to embrace American energy again and quit the war on American fossil fuels. That is what's fueling the huge gas price spikes that are hurting our families. They can't fill their gas tanks. So we need to be drilling here on federal land again. We need to embrace the resources we have. We need to make sure our infrastructure is going again, like the Keystone Pipeline and ANWR up in Alaska. He needs to approve the LNG export permits. These are practical things that he could do right now that I'm fighting for, and as a senator, I'm going to fight and get across the finish line, make sure that we become energy independent once again.
And I want to talk a little bit too, Republicans are known to be really tight on money, really good at keeping on a budget. That's kind of changed through the years. Talk to me a little bit about what's changed and why.
Well, several years that I've been in Congress, we have been able to cut discretionary spending, and there's just a lot of things that are mandatory categories that have continued to go up and up. But as I say, one, we need a balanced budget amendment. I've been the co-sponsor for many years. 49 states have in their state constitution a balanced budget amendment, and that forces the state legislatures to balance the budget, just like here in Missouri. We need that at the federal level. But also, I say we have to get our priorities right. And according to the Constitution, there's only a few things that we should be doing, and providing for the common defense is the most important thing. And so we need to keep our nation safe by making sure we have a strong military. But some of these other programs are best left at the state level or with private industry.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the 2020 election. Mike Pence, Bill Barr, and 70 courts have said that the 2020 presidential election was fair. Donald Trump stands by the fact that it was stolen. We know that you voted to overturn the election on January 6th. What specific evidence do you have that the election was not fair?
Yeah, well, I had concerns about what the election officials did in Pennsylvania and Arizona that were contrary to their state laws. And that caused me to think, hey, these results really are in question. And so that's why I did not certify those ballots. And I think it's imperative that we restore trust in our election process, that we have election integrity. I meet voters all over this state that they are very concerned about that. They want to make sure that their vote counts. And I'm so proud of the Missouri legislature here this year who took steps to shore up Missouri's election laws, making sure that everybody feels confident here in our state about it. We're going to have voter ID, and they're going to go back to paper ballots and a lot of things that restore confidence in people's vote. But I'm also pleased that several other states that were in question last year have taken steps to shore up their election laws, and I think that'll be very helpful moving forward.
Are you confident moving forward that the elections will be secure?
I feel much better now compared to a couple of years ago because of the steps that the state legislatures have made in Texas and Pennsylvania and Arizona and Georgia and a lot of these states that were in question. The legislature stepped up and said, hey, we want to make sure that these federal officials no longer violate our state law, that we put safeguards in place. And so I think things are much better.
Okay. Would you support Donald Trump if he runs for president in 2024?
Well, I'm very supportive of his policies and very supportive of him as a person. We'll see, how that plays out and if he runs or not. But I'm just very grateful for how he got our economy going. And I was glad to be alongside him and support the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that fueled our economy, and people had record employment, record wages, and that's what we need to do to get back to. And as a small business owner, that gives me a different viewpoint than my other people running for this office, that I've signed the front of a paycheck and not just the back. And I know the devastating impacts of regulation and taxation on job creation. And that's another reason I need to be the person advocating for Missouri and a strong economy in the Senate, because I have created jobs and I know how to get our economy going again.
Okay, I want to talk about abortion, another strong topic through this election. Across the country, people have a lot of opinions on this. Do you think that Congress should make a federal law outlawing abortions?
Well, I think there is a role to protect life at all levels, and that's what we're talking about, is that do children have a plan and purpose from God that deserves to live? And, I do support life, and I also support women in those cases where they have unplanned pregnancies, and that's why there's many pregnancy help centers across the country to support them. But I am a supporter of life, and I'm looking forward to having more babies have an opportunity to live their God-given purpose.
Okay, we understand also Missouri outlaws abortion in cases of rape or incest. Do you think that there should be exceptions for those?
Yeah. I mean, that is just a tough issue, right? I mean, that's just a heartbreaker. Can't imagine. It's just very difficult. There's no good answers in that situation. Where I stand on that, though, after a lot of thought and prayer, is that I don't believe any child deserves to die because of the sins of their father. And that's really kind of what you're looking at in those horrible cases. And I have met individuals who have been conceived through those means, and they're amazing people. And they say they're so grateful that I had a brave mom that chose life for me, and because I'm contributing, and so I think we still have to stand for life, but certainly we have to come alongside that woman and help support them every step of the way.
If it came up for a vote to make a law for those exceptions, how would you vote?
I would stand with life in those things.
Okay. You have also right now have an ad running that we talked about a little bit earlier, calling out men pretending to be women. Is there any belief based off of that you think that transgender people are pretending?
Well, I think it's important that we stand up for girls' sports. I'm a former track coach, And, those girls worked so hard, and Congress actually passed Title IX years ago, back in the early 70s, so that women had equality in education and in sports, and they've come so far, both in the opportunity to go to college and education and have scholarships, but also in women's athletics. And it just breaks my heart to see that being decimated now by allowing biological males who identify as females to participate in their sports. And so I think we have to stand up for fairness and for common sense and say, women's sports should be for women.
And what's unfair about it?
Well, because men, biological men have a physiological advantage. And they have a greater muscle mass, they have greater statute. If they're a swimmer, they have a greater reach, a greater lung capacity. And it's just not fair physiologically to be able to allow them to compete against a female.
Okay. We also know that you voted against a bill that would allow federal courts to temporarily remove a firearm from someone who is a threat to themselves or others. What would you be in support of as far as gun laws and those being in the hands of people who are a known threat?
Yeah, another difficult situation, and certainly we don't want that, but what we want is due process as well. It has to be constitutional. So I think there needs to be an opportunity for that person to appear in court and make their case before that determination is made, and so that's the difference.
Okay, even on domestic violence, abusers, they're still allowed to purchase firearms for 5 years. Are you opposed to that? Or rather not allowed to purchase firearms for 5 years?
Well, as long as they have an opportunity in court, I think if there's legitimate concerns and they've had the due process, then protections can take place.
Okay. On the laws on marijuana federally, do we think that should be allowed federally?
It's a controlled substance right now, and I think that makes sense. And here's some of my thinking on that background. I think it's important. I was a high school teacher for several years, and the last 5 years I was there. I was also a co-director of an at-risk program for teens. And I worked with a lot of teenagers who were starting to go down that road of drug addiction, and I have a real heart for them, and I don't want any other teenagers to do that. And of the many families and teenagers that I've worked with that have had a problem with drug addiction, all of them say that they started out with marijuana as a gateway drug. It is a drug, and so the federal government still calls it a controlled substance, and I think that we need to continue to look at it that way. Especially today's marijuana is far more potent than back in the 60s and 70s, and there's some real risk to taking it.
Okay, would you ever support expanding or reducing the size of the Supreme Court?
I think what we have now is working, and so we don't need to, fix something that's not broken.
I like that phrase. If Russia attacks a NATO country, do you think the U.S. should step in and help defend?
Well, we have to. We have Article 5 that would be triggered, and we and other NATO countries would have to, and that's why we have to have a strong national defense, and that is one of my areas of focus in Congress that makes me different than other people running, is that I have really worked to rebuild our military, and I'm very concerned about the weakness right now being displayed by our president that is fueling the aggression of Putin, and it is emboldening Xi Jinping over in China, as he may want to try to invade Taiwan, which would be horrific. But we're seeing instability all around the world because of the weakness displayed by this president. And that's why we have to have peace through strength. We have to have a strong military and make sure that no one wants to cross that line.
Okay, on the filibuster, there's talk of getting rid of it. Would you support that?
No, we have seen this year how important the filibuster is, and that only having, a few people stop this, we would have had even more disastrous policies passed on this country. And so I think there's something to be said for coming together in the Senate, having to have some agreement together and to look methodically at bills rather than just ramming through very quickly what Nancy Pelosi or what the House may pass.
Okay, we've talked about a lot of topics. What do you want people to take away from this, and why should they vote for you?
Yeah, well, I think they should know that I'm a person who cares, and that's what fuels what I do, whether it be teaching and now serving the people of the 4th District. I want to serve and represent the people of all this state who are hurting by the Democrat policies coming out of Washington. And I want them to know that I'm one of them, fighting for them. I'm a wife, mother, farmer, small business owner, teacher, that also is a fighter in Washington and has a track record of getting things done. I want them to know I'm an expert on foreign policy and that I've worked to rebuild our military, that I passed legislation to keep China from being able to sell video surveillance cameras to our country. I've been working to get more computer chips made here, make sure our military doesn't have those made from China. I've worked to help keep Boeing going strong here and that they can make those capabilities that's needed in the F-18. I've sponsored the amendments to keep the F-18 line going. I've sponsored the amendment to have the F-15 line the F-15s bought by our federal government that saved 1,000 jobs over here. And I'm going to continue to fight for a strong national defense. I've been sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party because of my strong stance against them and their human rights abuses. And others in this race, like Eric Schmidt, have pandered to the Chinese Communist Party, went to China and visited with them, asked them to come here. He sponsored a bill to spend $480 million of our state tax dollars to give to companies supporting these Chinese effort here in Missouri. He voted to sell farmland to China. And Eric Greitens, when he was a governor, also went to China and pander to them. So I want people to know that I am the fighter in this race, the track record of getting things done, supporting our military, and the one that truly has the credentials and is tough on our #1 adversary, which is China.
I appreciate you taking the time with us this evening. For those of you at home, a primary election day is next Tuesday, August 2nd. You can count on KMOV for your full election coverage. Thanks for joining us.